I believe anything you say.
That's up to y'all, really.
You say you aren't here testifying against the defendant because of any deal you made with police.
True that.
That you're here because you want to tell the truth about what happened to Mr. Gant in that housing project parking lot.
Yep.
When in fact, you are exactly the kind of person who would, if you felt you needed to, shoot a man down on a housing project parking lot and then lie to the police about it, would you not?
And look, I ain't never put my gun on no citizen.
You are amoral, are you not?
In early season 1 of The Wire, Omar Little is viewed by many as nothing more than a petty thief, a small-time, dare I say Robin Hood, who steals enough to make a living, yet gives enough back to the community, not to benefit such, but to rather not get snitched on. To paraphrase the Beatles, he gets by with a little help from his friends, and his friends get high with a little help from Omar. His motivation so far? Survival. He leeches off those who leech off others, so to make an easy yet dishonourable living. However, he does it with a swagger unlike any other gangster on the show, so as we tend to do with characters like Avon, we'll ignore the blatant evil before our eyes, and give him a pass.
You are feeding off the violence and the despair of the drug trade. You're stealing from those who themselves are stealing the lifeblood from our city. You are a parasite who leeches off
Just like you,
the culture of drugs. Excuse me? What?
I got the shotgun. You got the briefcase. It's on the game though, right?
Maurice Levy perfectly sums up Omar when confronting him in court, where he describes him as no better than those he robs, a gangster who's convinced himself and others that he's something more, a morally righteous man who lives by a strict code, when in reality, he isn't. He only talks to the police so to benefit himself, not the citizens of Baltimore, nor to serve justice to an innocent man in Gann, and is actually breaking the one rule almost no other gangster breaks on the show. Never talk to the police, no matter the circumstance. However, Omar does so, as it simply aids in his quest to topple the Barksdale Empire. Yet later on in the show, goes on to complain about how others break the rules of the game, in an attempt to topple him. Hypocrisy is highest order.
Once a month, I've been with her on a church Sunday, telling myself ain't no need to worry because ain't nobody in this city that low down to disrespect a Sunday morning.
Now imagine playing a game, and your opponent cheats in said game, and then goes on to taunt you about it once you're eliminated because of his actions. And then later on in the game, an ally of yours cheats in an attempt to get rid of the cheater, only to be hit with a hailstorm of grief, as apparently such a tactic is now so low and dishonourable, that the cheater himself, as well as the audience, seem to forget that not so long ago, the accuser tried something similar, and only in a world filled with despicable human beings could such a person be considered honourable. Later on in Season 1, Omar's motivation changes, as he's no longer in it for, quote-unquote, survival, but rather revenge. Avon and his crew had got their hands on someone close to Mr. Little's heart, and tortured him in the hopes of getting close to Mr. Little himself. However, Brandon didn't give up Omar, so his massacred body was dumped in the projects for all to see. A message. And this sets Omar on a warpath which carries on all throughout the first 3 seasons of the show, as he's under the impression that what Avon did to Brandon was beyond too far. Yet once more, forgets that he himself did something very similar to set Avon onto him.
Hey yo, where that?
Move, go ahead.
Ain't nothing here, yo.
Fucking head on.
Where that, man?
Where that, shorty?
Kitchen. Under the sink.
Hey yo, go on and get that.
Brandon was tortured and killed because he helped Omar rob and torture a member of the Barksdale organisation. And yes, I use the word torture Because that's exactly what it was. Omar shot Sterling, a kid, in the leg with a buckshot, because similarly to how Brandon refused to give up information on Omar, Sterling refused to give up information on the stash. Omar then proceeds to stick a shotgun in the face of an even smaller child, with the threat of pain and permanent damage. So for the majority of the series, Omar's running around and pretending like he's a man with a code, and that what the Barksdales did to Brandon was too far, when in actuality, what they gave Brandon is exactly what Omar gave somebody else: pain, suffering, disfigurement, and the threat of permanent damage. And for those who want to argue that such wasn't actually similar, and that what Avon did to Brandon was in fact far worse than what Omar did to Sterling, I would argue that the torture of somebody who was fine with threatening to take the life of a child, part of the game or otherwise, is more justified than that individual threatening and shooting a literal child. Omar was accused of being a hypocrite as early as Season 1, so for us to ponder that his claim of righteousness could have actually been false, and that he was in fact just another gangster with a gun, isn't out of the realm of possibility.
As rough as that neighborhood could be, we had us a community. Nobody, no victim, who didn't matter. And now all we got is bodies and predatory motherfuckers like you. And out where that girl fell, I saw kids acting like Omar, calling you by name, glorifying your ass. Makes me sick, motherfucker, how far we done fell.
After the death of Stringer, and the imprisonment of Avon, Omar's now back to where he started in Season 1, simply just out to survive. However, because of his feud with the Barksdales, the status of his name has now risen, to a point where he can't even go out to buy cereal without people running in fear. So in his mind, he feels he has no other obligation but to live up to the name, as he describes his situation as it ain't now what he's taking, but rather who he's taking it from. So Omar winds up crossing paths with Marlo Stanfield, and soon finds himself back in a similar situation to the one he just spent the last 3 seasons in. However, this time he's up against somebody a little more unforgiving than Avon and Stringer, somebody who would kill a taxpayer in cold blood, just to get a step closer to taking you out.
Since you feeling all biblical and righteous and all, you think on this. Now, if Omar ain't kill that delivery lady, somebody else did. But you giving him a free walk right now, though, ain't you? A man got to have a code.
In Season 4, Omar gets framed for the murder of a delivery lady, and whilst in prison, attempts to guilt trip Bunk into making it seem as though him not letting Omar free is the same as protecting whoever killed this lady, when in actuality, the only reason this woman is dead is not so much because of Marlo's actions, but rather Omar's. Think about it. Other than ego, Omar realistically had no reason to go after a player like Marlo. He wasn't struggling to survive money-wise. He wasn't out for revenge or justice, as I've crazily heard some people say. He simply just wanted to live up to the legend he made himself out to be whilst at war with Avon. Now granted, he didn't know who Marlo was at the time, as well as how ruthless he is. However, when threatened with war, Omar openly entertains such with a smile on his face, almost as if he's been eagerly awaiting such a moment, completely forgetting all of the lives that were lost in the war he had just been a part of. His grandma's life was nearly taken, one of his boyfriends was tortured to death with the other narrowly escaping the same fate. The list goes on. Omar knew the risks of going to war, yet smiled when given the opportunity to fight in another, and later on complains, because once more, somebody had gone too far, in an attempt to topple him.
Back on the hunt, were you?
In Season 4, Omar makes a promise to Bunk. He swears that if Bunk can help him get out of jail, in turn saving his life, then he'll no longer kill again. Omar makes it out as if he's going to lay low. However, as soon as he's set free, he's back on the hunt for Marlo. Granted, this time his aim isn't to kill him, rather than it is to take everything he owned. But once again, Omar isn't able to simply live a life of peace, and feels as though it's his duty to live up to the legend he's made himself out to be. Omar's been given a literal get out of jail free card, however throws himself right back into the fire for no other reason than ego and pride. Two of Marlowe's, arguably the most evil character in the series, most dominant traits. Anyway, events transpire. Marlowe murders Butchie, and now Omar finds himself in the same cycle he was in when hunting Avon. He breaks his promise to Bunk when killing Savino, and is later punished for such by no other than the devil himself, Kennard. All jokes aside, Omar is killed the moment he breaks his promise to Bunk, his code of honour, as Bunk, as well as we the audience, somehow view Omar as above all else, a man with a code. Yet as explained in this video, such is far from the truth, and as described by Marlowe, Omar's simply nothing more than another gangster with a gun.
Omar ain't no terrorist. He just another nigga with a gun.